The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence of Naval Air Station Oceana like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Commander Reyna Ghost Valdez had been staring at the same intelligence briefing for 3 hours, her coffee long cold, when the encrypted transmission arrived. The message was brief, coded, and carried the kind of operational urgency that made seasoned pilots check their gear twice. All available FA-18 Super Hornets to standby. Code Black. Immediate response required. Ghost set down her mug with deliberate precision, the ceramic clicking against metal in the otherwise silent ready room. Outside, the Virginia coastline stretched endlessly into darkness, punctuated only by the rhythmic sweep of runway lights. She'd seen enough Code Black alerts to know this wasn't a drill, but something felt different. The transmission had come through channels usually reserved for special operations, not standard carrier strike group communications. Her fingers traced the worn leather of her flight jacket, finding the small patch sewn into the inner pocket, a remnant from her previous life with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Most people didn't know that before she'd earned her wings, Reyna Valdez had spent 18 months training alongside Navy SEALs, learning close-quarters battle tactics that had nothing to do with aerial combat. It was an unusual path for a pilot, one that had earned her both respect and suspicion in equal measure. The ready room door burst open, and Commander Jack Maverick Thompson strode in, his face grim in the fluorescent lighting. Behind him, 3 other pilots filed in with the mechanical precision of men who'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Ghost noted their expressions, focused but not surprised. They'd been expecting this. Valdez, Thompson's voice carried the weight of command, but there was something else beneath it. Uncertainty, maybe even doubt. You're taking point on this one. The words hung in the air like smoke from a controlled explosion. Ghost felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came whenever her competence was questioned not through words, but through the careful selection of them. Taking point meant leading the mission, but it also meant being the first to fail if things went sideways. "What's the situation, Commander?" Her voice remained steady, professional, betraying none of the calculations already running through her mind. Thompson activated the wall-mounted display, and suddenly the room filled with satellite imagery of a cargo vessel approximately 200 nautical miles off the coast. The ship appeared unremarkable, standard commercial freighter, Liberian flag, nothing that would normally warrant military intervention. "This is the MV Serena's Dream," Thompson began, his laser pointer highlighting specific sections of the vessel. 48 hours ago, it was carrying automotive parts from Hamburg to Norfolk. Now it's dead in the water, completely dark, and not responding to any communications. Ghost studied the imagery, her trained eye picking out details that others might miss. The ship's position was wrong, too far south for its declared route, sitting in waters that would make rescue operations complicated. More importantly, the deck configuration didn't match standard cargo operations. Thompson continued, "Coast Guard attempted contact 18 hours ago. Nothing. Maritime patrol aircraft flew over 6 hours ago and reported no signs of life, but thermal imaging suggests people are still aboard." The room fell silent except for the low hum of electronics and the distant sound of aircraft engines warming up on the flight line. Ghost could feel the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. The mission parameters were deliberately vague, which meant one of two things. Either command didn't know what they were dealing with, or they knew exactly what they were dealing with and didn't want to say it over standard communications channels. Ghost suspected the latter. She stepped closer to the display, studying the vessel's superstructure. Something about the arrangement of containers on deck bothered her, too organized, too symmetrical for standard cargo operations. It looked more like a defensive position than a shipping manifest. "Sir, what's our rules of engagement?" The question came from Lieutenant Bobby "Shark" Martinez, the youngest pilot in the squadron. His eagerness was both admirable and dangerous. Thompson's hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. Reconnaissance and assessment, visual contact only, no hostile action unless directly threatened. Ghost caught the subtle emphasis on unless directly threatened. In her experience, those were the missions where everything went wrong fast. The kind where pilots who followed orders ended up in situations that orders couldn't solve. "Time to wheels up," she asked. 15 minutes. Weather's clear, see state moderate. You'll have full carrier support once you're on station. Thompson paused, his eyes finding hers across the room. "Ghost, I need you to understand this one's different. Whatever's on that ship, someone wants it handled quietly." The implication was clear. This wasn't about a disabled freighter. This was about something valuable enough to warrant sending military assets into international waters without proper justification, and sensitive enough to require the kind of pilot who could make difficult decisions without asking uncomfortable questions. Ghost nodded once, already running through pre-flight procedures in her mind. Outside, she could hear the whine of jet engines spinning up, the sound that always made her pulse quicken with anticipation. As the briefing concluded and the other pilots filed out to begin their preparations, Thompson caught her arm. "Valdez, one more thing. The ship's manifest lists a crew of 12, but satellite imaging suggests significantly more people aboard. Be ready for anything." She met his gaze steadily. "Always am, sir." But as Ghost walked toward the flight line, her hand instinctively checked for the tactical knife she still carried from her SEAL training days. In her experience, when superior officers started talking about being ready for anything, it usually meant they were sending you into a situation where standard aviation tactics wouldn't be enough. The FA-18F Super Hornet sat on the tarmac like a predator at rest, its twin engines and angular design speaking to both power and precision. Ghost ran her pre-flight inspection with the methodical thoroughness that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments and countless training exercises that had pushed her to the absolute limits of human endurance. Her crew chief, Senior Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, approached with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been turning wrenches on Navy aircraft since before Ghost had learned to drive. Santos was one of the few people who knew about Ghost's unconventional background, and she never asked questions about the extra equipment Ghost sometimes carried on missions. "Birds clean, ma'am. Fuels topped. Weapons systems green across the board. Though I notice you've requested the reconnaissance pod instead of standard ordnance." Ghost secured her helmet and performed a final systems check. "Sometimes the best weapon is information, Chief." Santos grinned, the expression transforming her weathered face. "Copy that, ma'am. Bring my bird home in one piece." The exchange was ritual, comfort in a world where comfort was often in short supply. Ghost climbed into the cockpit with the fluid motion of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, but her mind was already racing ahead to the mission parameters. As she strapped in and began the startup sequence, Ghost reflected on the path that had brought her here. Most naval aviators followed a straight line from flight school to squadron assignment. Her route had been more complicated, flight school, then an unexpected opportunity to cross-train with special operations, then back to aviation with a skill set that made her uniquely qualified for missions that existed in the gray areas between conventional warfare and special operations. The SEAL training had been brutal, designed to break down preconceptions about what was possible under extreme stress. Close quarters battle tactics, advanced reconnaissance techniques, and most importantly, the ability to make split-second decisions when the situation deviated from the plan. Because in Ghost's experience, the situation always deviated from the plan. Her call sign hadn't come from her ability to disappear, though she was exceptionally good at that. It had come from her tendency to appear exactly where the enemy least expected her, with capabilities they hadn't planned for. It was a reputation that had served her well, but it also meant that she often found herself assigned to missions that other pilots would refuse. The Super Hornet's engines wound up to full power, and Ghost felt the familiar sensation of controlled violence that came with military aviation. The aircraft was a marvel of engineering, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 1.8, armed with a 20 cannon and capable of carrying a wide variety of air-to-air and air-to-surface weapons. Today, however, her weapon stations carried only cameras and sensors. Tower control cleared her for takeoff, and Ghost advanced the throttles with the smooth precision that had made her one of the Navy's most reliable pilots. The Super Hornet accelerated down the runway with the kind of power that never got old, transitioning from ground vehicle to aircraft in a matter of seconds that still felt like magic despite thousands of hours of flight time. As the Virginia coastline fell away beneath her, Ghost settled into the meditative state that long-range flights often induced. The mission ahead was simple in concept: locate the vessel, assess the situation, report back. But simplicity in concept often translated to complexity in execution, and Ghost had learned to trust the instincts that had kept her alive when situations turned complicated. The flight to the target area would take approximately 45 minutes at cruising speed, giving her time to review the intelligence data and consider the tactical implications. The MV Serena's Dream had been missing for 48 hours, long enough for any legitimate emergency to have been resolved or for the crew to have activated emergency beacons. Ghost activated her navigation systems and settled onto a heading that would take her directly to the ship's last known position. The morning sun painted the Atlantic in shades of gold and blue, a deceptively peaceful scene that belied the tension building in her chest. At 20,000 feet, the world below looked ordered and predictable. From this altitude, the ocean appeared smooth as glass, stretching endlessly in all directions. It was easy to forget that beneath that serene surface lay depths that could swallow aircraft carriers without a trace, and currents that could carry secrets across continents. Ghost checked her communications equipment and established contact with her handler at Naval Air Station Oshana. The radio protocols were standard, but she noticed subtle deviations in the authentication codes that suggested this mission was being monitored at levels well above normal operational command. Ghost 1, this is Watchtower. Radio check over. Watchtower Ghost 1, 5x5, steady as she goes. ETA to target area 30 minutes. Copy Ghost 1. Be advised, weather conditions on station are clear with unlimited visibility. Sea state moderate with swells running 3 to 5 feet. No other air traffic reported in the area. The absence of other air traffic was notable. The shipping lanes off the Virginia coast were heavily traveled, and it was unusual for the airspace to be completely clear during daylight hours. Someone had made sure she would be working alone. Ghost adjusted her flight path slightly, a minor course correction that would bring her to the target area from the southwest rather than directly from the west. It was a small tactical advantage, but in her experience, small advantages often made the difference between mission success and disaster. As she flew, Ghost found herself thinking about the cargo manifest Thompson had mentioned. Automotive parts from Hamburg to Norfolk was about as mundane as international shipping got, but the ship's position and behavior suggested something far more complex. In her years of experience with special operations, she'd learned that the most dangerous situations often began with the most ordinary explanations. Her radar display remained clear, confirming that she was alone in this particular piece of sky. The isolation was both comforting and concerning. Comforting because it meant no immediate threats, concerning because it meant no immediate support if things went sideways. The Super Hornet's autopilot held course with machine precision, leaving Ghost free to study the tactical situation. Whatever was happening aboard the MV Serena's Dream, it was important enough to warrant sending a military asset into international waters without proper diplomatic clearance, and sensitive enough to require a pilot with special operations experience. In Ghost's estimation, that combination usually meant one of three things: espionage, terrorism, or weapons trafficking. None of those possibilities were particularly encouraging. 25 minutes into the flight, Ghost began her descent toward the target area, reducing altitude to 5,000 feet for better visual reconnaissance capability. The ocean below remained empty except for the occasional whitecap, painting a picture of maritime tranquility that her instincts told her was deceptive. At 15 miles from the target coordinates, Ghost activated her reconnaissance systems and began scanning the horizon through her aircraft's advanced optics. The equipment was military-grade, capable of identifying individual people from altitudes that made the aircraft invisible to observers on the surface. Watchtower Ghost 1, beginning approach to target area, commencing reconnaissance sweep. Copy Ghost 1. You are cleared to proceed with visual reconnaissance. Report all observations. Ghost banked slightly to port, establishing a search pattern that would allow her to survey the entire area systematically. Modern naval reconnaissance was part science, part art, and part intuition. The science came from understanding how to use sensors and equipment effectively. The art came from knowing what to look for and how to interpret what you saw. The intuition came from years of experience that taught you when something wasn't quite right. At 12 miles from the coordinates, Ghost's radar detected a large surface contact directly ahead. The signature matched the specifications for a commercial cargo vessel, but there were anomalies in the radar return that suggested modifications to the ship's superstructure. Through her optical systems, the MV Serena's Dream appeared as a dark speck on the horizon, gradually resolving into the familiar outline of a mid-sized cargo freighter. But as Ghost closed the distance, details began to emerge that confirmed her growing suspicions about this mission. The ship was indeed dead in the water, sitting motionless in moderate swells that rocked it gently from side to side. But there were no distress signals visible, no signs of crew activity on deck, and most telling, no evidence of the kind of damage that would explain why a functional vessel would simply stop moving. Ghost reduced her altitude to 1,000 feet and began a systematic reconnaissance of the vessel, starting with a high-speed pass along its port side. Through her optics, she could see that the ship appeared to be in excellent condition. No obvious hull damage, no signs of fire or explosion, nothing that would explain its current status. But the cargo containers on deck were arranged in patterns that didn't match standard commercial shipping practices. They were positioned to create clear fields of fire along the ship's sides and stern, suggesting defensive preparations that had nothing to do with automotive parts. As Ghost completed her first pass and banked to starboard for a second approach, she caught a glimpse of movement on the ship's bridge. Someone was watching her through binoculars, tracking her aircraft's movement with the kind of professional attention that suggested military or paramilitary training. Watchtower Ghost 1. I have eyes on target. Ship appears structurally sound but non-responsive. Observing possible personnel on bridge. Requesting guidance on rules of engagement. The radio silence that followed lasted exactly long enough for Ghost to complete her turn and line up for another reconnaissance pass. When Watchtower finally responded, the voice was different, older, more senior, carrying the kind of authority that came from decades of making difficult decisions. Ghost 1, this is Admiral Hayes. Continue reconnaissance but maintain safe distance. Do not attempt direct communication with vessel. Report all observations in detail. Admiral Hayes. Ghost recognized the name, Naval Special Warfare Command, the kind of flag officer who didn't get involved in routine maritime patrol missions. His direct involvement confirmed what she'd already suspected. This wasn't about a disabled freighter. On her second pass, Ghost flew along the ship's starboard side at 800 feet, close enough to observe details but high enough to maintain tactical advantage. What she saw through her optics made her reassess the entire situation. The crew she observed on deck weren't behaving like merchant sailors. They moved with military precision, maintaining positions that provided overlapping fields of observation. More importantly, several of them were carrying weapons, not the small arms that merchant vessels sometimes carried for protection against pirates, but serious military hardware. Ghost keyed her radio. Watchtower, Admiral Hayes. Ghost 1 observing multiple armed personnel on deck. Weapons appear to be military specification. Personnel demonstrating tactical discipline inconsistent with merchant crew. Copy Ghost 1. Continue observation. Do not engage unless directly threatened. As Ghost banked for a third pass, this time approaching from the stern, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The ship's cargo holds had been modified with what appeared to be reinforced doors and additional ventilation systems. The modifications were subtle, the kind that wouldn't be obvious from a distance, but they suggested the ship was carrying something that required environmental controls far more sophisticated than automotive parts. Her SEAL training had included extensive education on weapons of mass destruction and their transportation requirements. The modifications she was observing were consistent with chemical or biological containment systems, designed to maintain specific temperature and atmospheric conditions during transport. Ghost completed her reconnaissance pattern and established a holding pattern at 2,000 feet, well outside the range of most small arms but close enough to maintain visual contact with the vessel. The tactical situation was clear. She was looking at a ship that was definitely not what it appeared to be, crewed by people who were definitely not merchant sailors, carrying cargo that almost certainly wasn't automotive parts. Admiral Hayes, Ghost 1, requesting immediate consultation with hazmat specialists. Observed cargo hold modifications suggest chemical or biological containment capability. Recommend treating this as potential WMD transport situation. The radio silence this time stretched longer, and Ghost could imagine the frantic discussions taking place in secure conference rooms back at Naval Air Station Oceana. When Hayes finally responded, his voice carried the weight of decisions that could affect national security. Ghost 1, maintain observation position. Do not approach closer than 1,000 feet. Additional assets are being deployed to your location. Additional assets meant backup was coming, but it also meant the situation was escalating beyond routine reconnaissance. In Ghost's experience, when admirals started deploying additional assets to international waters, it usually meant someone was about to make a very dangerous decision. As she maintained her holding pattern, Ghost used her aircraft's advanced sensors to compile a detailed intelligence picture of the vessel and its crew. The reconnaissance pod mounted beneath her aircraft was recording everything, building a database that would be analyzed by intelligence specialists who understood the implications of what she was seeing. But Ghost's special operations training had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct she developed over years of dangerous missions was telling her that this situation was about to become significantly more complicated. The MV Serena's Dream sat motionless in moderate swells, but Ghost could see increased activity on deck as her continued presence attracted more attention from the crew. Whatever they were doing aboard that vessel, they clearly hadn't expected military surveillance, and they were adapting their operations accordingly. Through her optics, Ghost observed what appeared to be the preparation of defensive positions using the cargo containers as cover. It was a professional job, the kind of preparation that suggested the crew had significant military experience and had planned for the possibility of armed confrontation. She keyed her radio again. Admiral Hayes, Ghost 1, observing defensive preparations on deck. Personnel are using cargo containers to establish firing positions. This vessel is preparing for armed conflict. Hayes' response was immediate and carried the kind of authority that ended discussions before they began. Ghost 1. You are to maintain observation position and avoid any action that could be interpreted as hostile. Under no circumstances are you to approach closer than 1,000 feet or take any action that might provoke a response. The instructions were clear, but Ghost's training had taught her to think several moves ahead in tactical situations. If the crew of the MV Serena's Dream was preparing for armed conflict, it meant they expected it. And if they expected it, it meant someone else was coming to this party with significantly more firepower than a single reconnaissance aircraft. Ghost checked her fuel status and calculated her remaining time on station. She had approximately 2 hours of fuel remaining, enough to maintain observation for an extended period, but not enough to wait indefinitely for additional assets to arrive. As she maintained her surveillance, Ghost noticed something that changed her understanding of the tactical situation entirely. The ship's radar mast was rotating with the regular precision of active scanning equipment, and she could see what appeared to be sophisticated communications antennas that were definitely not standard merchant vessel equipment. The MV Serena's Dream wasn't just carrying something dangerous. It was actively communicating with someone, coordinating activities that required real-time information exchange. That level of operational sophistication suggested an organization with resources and capabilities well beyond typical maritime criminal enterprises. Ghost expanded her surveillance pattern slightly, scanning the surrounding ocean for other vessels that might be part of a larger operation. Modern naval warfare had taught her that what you could see was often less important than what you couldn't see, and her instincts were telling her that the freighter was just one part of a much larger tactical picture. At the edge of her radar range, Ghost detected multiple surface contacts approaching from the northeast. The contacts were moving at high speed directly toward the MV Serena's Dream, maintaining a formation that suggested military coordination. Admiral Hayes, Ghost 1. Multiple surface contacts approaching from northeast, bearing 045 degrees. Count appears to be 3 vessels in tactical formation, estimated time to target 15 minutes. Hayes' response came immediately, carrying an edge of urgency that confirmed Ghost's suspicions about the developing situation. Ghost 1. Identify approaching vessels if possible. Do not engage, but be prepared to withdraw on my command. Ghost adjusted her flight path to get a better look at the approaching vessels, using her aircraft's advanced radar and optical systems to gather as much intelligence as possible. What she saw confirmed her worst fears about this mission. The approaching vessels were military patrol boats, sleek and fast, designed for exactly this kind of operation. They were flying flags she didn't immediately recognize, but their movement patterns and equipment suggested professional naval forces with specific tactical objectives. As the patrol boats closed the distance to the MV Serena's Dream, Ghost realized she was witnessing something far more complex than a simple maritime law enforcement operation. This was a coordinated military action involving multiple parties, taking place in international waters where the rules of engagement were deliberately ambiguous. Her SEAL training had included extensive education on maritime special operations, and she recognized the tactical pattern developing below. The approaching patrol boats would establish a perimeter around the freighter, while their crews conducted some kind of boarding operation. It was a professional job, the kind of operation that required months of planning and intelligence gathering. Ghost maintained her observation position, recording everything while trying to understand her role in the developing situation. She was clearly here as more than just an observer. Someone had wanted an American military asset present to witness whatever was about to happen aboard the MV Serena's Dream. As the patrol boats reached the freighter and began their approach, Ghost observed the crew of the MV Serena's Dream preparing to receive boarders. But instead of the resistance she'd expected based on their defensive preparations, the crew appeared to be cooperating with the boarding party. Admiral Hayes, Ghost 1. Patrol boats have reached target vessel, observing what appears to be coordinated boarding operation. Crew of target vessel is cooperating with boarders. Hayes' response carried implications that made Ghost reassess everything she thought she knew about this mission. Ghost 1. Continue observation. Record everything. Do not interfere under any circumstances. As Ghost watched through her optics, she saw the boarding party systematically search the MV Serena's Dream while the original crew was gathered on deck under guard. The operation was methodical and professional, suggesting the boarders knew exactly what they were looking for. After approximately 30 minutes, the boarding party appeared to locate their objective in one of the modified cargo holds Ghost had identified earlier. Whatever they found required special handling equipment and protective gear, confirming her suspicions about chemical or biological weapons. The tactical situation crystallized with sudden clarity. Ghost was witnessing the interdiction of a weapons of mass destruction shipment, conducted by forces that may or may not have been operating with official sanction. Her presence ensured that the United States had a complete intelligence picture of the operation, regardless of its ultimate outcome. As the boarding party completed their mission and prepared to withdraw, Ghost realized that her real mission was just beginning. Whatever had been aboard the MV Serena's Dream was now in the hands of the patrol boat crews, and someone in Washington needed to know exactly what that meant for national security. The patrol boats departed as efficiently as they had arrived, leaving the MV Serena's Dream floating dead in the water with its crew still aboard. The entire operation had taken less than 2 hours, but Ghost understood that the implications would be analyzed for months by intelligence specialists trying to understand the broader strategic picture. Admiral Hayes, Ghost 1. Boarding party has withdrawn. Target vessel remains on station with crew aboard. Recommend immediate consultation with intelligence analysts regarding observed cargo transfer operation. Hayes' response was decisive. Ghost 1. Return to base immediately. Debrief will commence upon your arrival. Maintain radio silence regarding this mission until further notice. As Ghost banked toward home and advanced her throttles for the return flight, she reflected on what she'd witnessed. The mission had been presented as routine reconnaissance, but the reality was far more complex. She'd observed a sophisticated international operation involving weapons of mass destruction, conducted by forces with military-level capabilities and planning. Her SEAL training had taught her to think beyond the immediate tactical situation, to consider the broader strategic implications of what she'd observed. The boarding operation had been too smooth, too professional, to be the result of random law enforcement activity. Someone had known exactly where the MV Serena's Dream would be, what it was carrying, and how to intercept it. The flight back to Naval Air Station Oshina gave Ghost time to process the intelligence she'd gathered and consider the questions that would inevitably follow her debrief. The most important question was one that might never be answered in official channels. Had she just witnessed the prevention of a terrorist attack, or had she observed the theft of weapons that could be used in a future attack? As the Virginia coastline appeared on the horizon, Ghost prepared mentally for the intensive debrief that would follow her landing. In her experience, missions that involved admirals and weapons of mass destruction generated paperwork and questions that could continue for months. But the immediate tactical situation was clear. She had successfully completed her reconnaissance mission, gathered critical intelligence, and maintained operational security throughout. Whatever political and strategic implications followed from her observations, she had performed her duties with the professionalism that had made her one of the Navy's most reliable pilots. The landing approach to Naval Air Station Oshina was routine, a welcome return to the predictable after hours of uncertainty and tension. As Ghost configured her aircraft for landing and contacted the tower for clearance, she felt the familiar satisfaction that came from completing a difficult mission successfully. But as she taxied toward the hangar where Admiral Hayes and his intelligence staff would be waiting for her debrief, Ghost understood that her real challenge was just beginning. The intelligence she'd gathered would be analyzed, classified, and incorporated into strategic assessments that could influence military and diplomatic decisions for years to come. Her call sign had come from her ability to appear where enemies least expected her, but today she'd found herself in a situation where the identity of friends and enemies was deliberately ambiguous. The skills she'd learned in SEAL training, tactical thinking, operational security, and the ability to make critical decisions under pressure had served her well. As Ghost shut down her aircraft systems and prepared for debrief, she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. The combination of aviation skills and special operations training that had once seemed like an unusual career choice had proven to be exactly what was needed for missions that existed in the gray areas between conventional military operations and intelligence work. Senior Chief Santos was waiting as Ghost climbed down from the cockpit, her weathered face reflecting both relief and curiosity about the mission that had kept Ghost away for nearly 4 hours. "How'd she handle, ma'am?" Santos asked, running her practiced eye over the aircraft for any signs of damage or unusual wear. Ghost handed over her helmet and flight gear with the ritual precision that marked the end of every mission. "Like a dream, Chief, your bird performed flawlessly." But as Ghost walked toward the debriefing room where Admiral Hayes was waiting, she knew that the real test of her performance was just beginning. The intelligence she'd gathered during her surveillance of the MV Serena's Dream would be crucial to understanding a complex international situation, with implications she was only beginning to grasp. The debrief lasted 6 hours and covered every detail of Ghost's surveillance mission, from the moment she'd first spotted the MV Serena's Dream to her final observations of the boarding operation. Admiral Hayes conducted the questioning personally, assisted by intelligence specialists who understood the strategic implications of what Ghost had witnessed. The questions were thorough and professional, designed to extract every piece of tactical intelligence while avoiding speculation about broader political implications. Ghost answered with the precision that had made her valuable for sensitive missions, providing facts and observations while avoiding interpretations that were beyond her area of expertise. As the debrief concluded, Admiral Hayes provided Ghost with the kind of mission assessment that confirmed what she'd already suspected about her growing reputation within Naval Special Warfare Command. "Commander Valdez, your performance on this mission was exceptional. The intelligence you gathered will be crucial to understanding a complex international situation that could have significant implications for national security." Hayes paused, studying Ghost with the kind of evaluation that came from decades of assessing military personnel under pressure. "Your unique combination of aviation skills and special operations training made you the ideal choice for this mission. I suspect we'll have similar missions for you in the future." The implications were clear. Ghost's unconventional background and proven performance under pressure had marked her for assignments that existed at the intersection of conventional military operations and special operations. It was a career path that offered unique challenges and opportunities, but also risks that went well beyond normal aviation duties. As Ghost left the debriefing room and headed toward her quarters, she reflected on the day's events and their implications for her future. The mission had confirmed her value for sensitive operations, but it had also demonstrated the kind of moral and tactical complexity that would characterize her career going forward. The MV Serena's Dream sat somewhere in the Atlantic, its crew probably wondering what they'd gotten themselves involved with and how their cargo had attracted the attention of multiple military forces. The weapons that had been aboard the ship were now in the hands of forces whose identity and intentions remained classified well above Ghost's security clearance. But Ghost's role in the operation had been exactly what was needed: professional reconnaissance that provided decision-makers with the intelligence they needed to understand a complex and potentially dangerous situation. Her SEAL training had taught her that success in special operations often came from being in the right place at the right time with the right skills, and today had been a perfect example of that principle in action. As Ghost prepared for what she suspected would be a sleepless night of continued questioning from intelligence specialists, she felt the satisfaction that came from completing a mission that had tested every aspect of her training and experience. The combination of aviation skills and special operations experience that had once seemed like an unusual career choice had proven to be exactly what was needed for the kind of missions that would define the next phase of her military career. The call sign Ghost had originally reflected her ability to appear where enemies least expected her, but after today's mission, it seemed more appropriate than ever. She had successfully penetrated a complex international operation, gathered crucial intelligence, and withdrawn without compromise, exactly the kind of performance that made her valuable for missions that conventional pilots couldn't handle. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ghost knew that her unique background and proven performance would continue to open doors to missions that existed at the cutting edge of military aviation and special operations. The path she'd chosen wasn't easy, but it was exactly where her skills and instincts told her she belonged.